My son left me on a remote road 10 minutes after my husband's funeral. He said the house and the business were his now. It was 6:42 p.m. on October 17th, and the dust kept sticking to my black shoes. My bag felt heavier than it should have, like something inside was pulling down. He had made me put my phone on the car seat for the drive, then locked it in the console. "Get off," he said, eyes forward, hands tight on the wheel. I stepped out because I didn't argue anymore. The door shut. The engine rose. He drove away without looking back. I stood there counting the taillights until they were gone. No phone, no wallet, no ride, just a thin cardigan, the funeral program folded in my pocket, and the sound of gravel settling. A pickup slowed once, then kept going. My mouth tasted like cold coffee from the church hall. A paper hospital wristband still scratched my wrist under my sleeve. My knees felt stiff, but I kept my posture. I opened my bag with both hands and checked the one thing he hadn't searched: paper edges, a pen, a small key taped to the inside seam. Behind me, in the field, a figure moved between the trees. Not close, not far. I didn't call out. I didn't run. I took out the key, and I finally let myself whisper, "Good," because before his father died, I signed something my son never knew existed, ever. At 7:03 p.m., I started walking east. The road marker read County 14. I knew that sign because I had approved its replacement invoice 3 years earlier. The metal post still leaned slightly to the left. My husband refused to straighten it. My heels sank into gravel. I took them off and carried them. The sky was turning flat, gray. A tractor engine hummed somewhere behind the trees. At 7:19 p.m., a white farm truck stopped beside me. The driver rolled down his window halfway. "You lost?" he asked. "No," I said. "I need a ride to Lawson Storage off Route 8. He studied me for a second. I kept my voice steady. "No shaking. No story. That's 5 miles." "I know." He unlocked the door. The seat smelled like diesel and peppermint gum. I kept my bag on my lap, the paper inside pressed against my palm through the fabric. The small taped key rested under the lining seam. At 7:32 p.m., he dropped me in front of Lawson Storage. The office lights were off, but the gate keypad still blinked green. "Thank you," I said, stepping down. He nodded and left. I walked to Unit C-17. My name was not on the front. It never had been. I used a corporate abbreviation instead. I slid the small key into the lockbox, bolted beside the door, and removed a second key. Inside were 3 file boxes and a metal case. I turned on the overhead bulb. It flickered twice before holding steady. The concrete floor was cold through my stockings. I opened the metal case first. Inside, copies of the Business Incorporation Amendment dated March 3rd, 2 months before my husband's stroke. A notarized operating agreement revision. My signature. His signature. 2 witnesses. Clause 8.2. In the event of incapacitation or death, voting control reverts to managing partner as designated in sealed addendum. The sealed addendum was not in our home office. It was here. I removed it from the envelope. I did not unfold it yet. I placed it back into the case. Next box, property deed transfer draft prepared but not filed. My husband hesitated on that one. I did not. Third box, insurance restructuring documents. Beneficiary update forms signed April 12th. My son had never asked about insurance. At 7:58 p.m., I locked the unit and returned the spare key to the lockbox. I placed the metal case inside my tote bag. Then I walked to the side of the building where the public phone still hung against the brick wall. I had checked that phone last year when the cellular tower went down. It still worked then. I inserted a coin from the small zipper pocket of my bag. At 8:07 p.m., I dialed Attorney Brenner's direct line. He answered on the third ring. "Brenner." "It's me," I said. A pause. Paper shuffled on his end. "Are you safe?" "Yes." "Did he do what we expected?" "Yes." Another pause. Longer. "Where are you?" "Storage unit." I said. "I have the addendum." "Good. Do not go back to the house. Do not call him. I'll file the incapacitation review request first thing in the morning. That gives us a timestamp. I leaned against the brick wall. The metal phone cord brushed my wrist. He changed the locks yesterday. I said, I know. The locksmith invoice was billed to the company card at 2:14 p.m. I closed my eyes once, then opened them. Has he accessed the operating account? He tried. The bank flagged the attempt at 4:02 p.m. signature mismatch. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Tomorrow, Brenner continued, we request formal board acknowledgement of the amended control clause. He will receive notice by certified mail. He thinks everything transferred automatically. That assumption will cost him. At 8:16 p.m., I hung up. I walked to the bench outside the unit and sat down. The metal felt cold through the thin fabric of my skirt. I removed the hospital wristband and folded it twice before placing it in the trash bin. At 8:23 p.m., my son called the house landline. I knew because Brenner texted through the firm's secure portal. Attempted contact logged. I did not respond. At 8:40 p.m., I took another coin and called the cab service listed on the storage office window. I need pickup at Lawson Storage. I said. Name, the dispatcher asked. I gave the corporate abbreviation. The cab arrived at 8:57 p.m. The driver did not ask questions. I paid cash from the inner pocket I had stitched inside my cardigan months ago. By 9:22 p.m., I was inside a small motel off Route 8. Room 12. Brown carpet. A humming refrigerator. One lamp missing a bulb. I placed the metal case on the desk and finally unfolded the sealed addendum. Managing partner, Evelyn Hart. Voting control. Absolute upon medical incapacity certification. Date signed, March 3rd. Witnessed. Notarized. At 9:41 p.m., I took a photo of the document using the motel desk scanner and uploaded it through the attorney portal. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and removed the safety pin from the hem of my dress. I used it to open the stitched pocket and removed the second envelope I had sewn in 2 weeks earlier. Inside, a letter addressed to the board chairman, predated and signed. Subject, transition preparedness. My husband knew his condition was worsening. My son did not. At 10:06 p.m., I set an alarm for 6 a.m. The refrigerator kept buzzing. A truck shifted gears outside. I lay back fully dressed. At 10:19 p.m., my son sent an email to the company server announcing leadership transition. I knew because Brenner forwarded it. Subject line, new chapter. He sees seat staff. He wrote that he was honoring his father's vision. He did not mention me. I read it once. Then I turned off the lamp. The next move would not be mine. It would be procedural, and he had already made his first mistake. At 6 a.m., the alarm vibrated against the motel nightstand. I turned it off before the second buzz. The room smelled faintly of bleach and old coffee filters. I sat up slowly, knees stiff from the drive and the walk. By 6:18 a.m., I was dressed in the same black skirt, cardigan buttoned fully. I placed the metal case back into my tote and checked out without speaking to the clerk. The receipt printer clicked twice before releasing the paper. I folded it and kept it. At 6:42 a.m., I was seated inside Brenner's office conference room. The blinds were half open, morning light cut across the table, stopping just short of the document folders he had prepared. You slept, he asked. Enough. He slid a certified envelope toward me. Filed at 8:01 a.m. board acknowledgement request. Emergency review window opened. I nodded. Next folder, bank governance restrictions. Your son attempted a second withdrawal at 7:12 a.m. Brenner said, denied again. I opened the folder. Inside were printed login timestamps, IP addresses, authorization failures. He's using the executive office terminal. I said, yes, and he's CCING accounting on directives he doesn't yet have authority to issue. At 8:37 a.m., Brenner's assistant entered quietly and placed a printed email on the table. Subject, immediate structural changes. My son had instructed payroll to reroute executive compensation. He signed it as acting director. I read the timestamp twice. He moved fast. I said, "Too fast," Brenner replied. By 9:05 a.m., the bank's legal liaison joined by speakerphone. Her voice came through steady, procedural. Until the incapacitation certification is contested or overturned, she said, control remains with the designated managing partner. "That's me," I said. "Yes, Mrs. Hart." She confirmed all executive transactions were frozen pending governance verification. At 9:42 a.m., we submitted the medical incapacity documentation signed by my husband's neurologist 6 weeks before his death. It had been prepared, quietly stored with Brenner, never discussed at home. At 10:11 a.m., my son's third bank attempt triggered a formal compliance review. At 10:28 a.m., the board chairman emailed Brenner directly requesting an emergency call. We joined at 10:40 a.m. I was unaware of this amendment, the chairman said. It was executed privately due to medical sensitivity. Brenner replied. All signatures verified. Silence followed. Papers shuffled on their end. My son joined the call at 10:52 a.m. without greeting. "This is procedural overreach," he said immediately. "I've already assumed operational command." "You've assumed it," the chairman said, "but governance determines authority. I'm his son. And she is his managing partner." Brenner replied calmly. My son exhaled sharply into the microphone. "This is temporary," he said. "We'll resolve it internally." "There is nothing internal to resolve," Brenner said. Clause 8.2 is self-executing. At 11:07 a.m., the call ended. By 11:19 a.m., my son sent a company-wide email stating operations would continue without disruption. He did not reference the board review. At 12:03 p.m., accounting forwarded Brenner an instruction my son had issued to liquidate a secondary equipment holding, unauthorized, timestamped, signed digitally. At 12:41 p.m., the bank flagged the liquidation request as governance breach attempt. At 1:10 p.m., I authorized a formal notice to all department heads. Operational decisions require managing partner approval effective immediately. I signed it digitally. My hand did not shake. By 1:36 p.m., replies began arriving. Short, careful, acknowledged, received, understood. At 2:05 p.m., the warehouse director called Brenner's office directly to confirm chain of command. Brenner transferred the call to me. "Ma'am," he said, voice low, "who should we report to now?" "You report to me?" I said. A pause. "Yes, ma'am." At 2:44 p.m., IT logged that my son attempted to revoke my server credentials. Denied automatically under governance lock. At 3:12 p.m., he attempted again, using administrator override. Flagged. Recorded. At 3:50 p.m., Brenner printed the access logs and placed them into a new evidence folder. Pattern forming, he said. I watched the printer light blink as each page slid out. At 4:18 p.m., the board chairman requested an in-person review meeting scheduled for Thursday at 9 a.m. 3 days away. Formal notice sent to both parties. At 4:52 p.m., my son emailed me directly for the first time since the funeral. Subject, "We need to talk." Message body, "Call me. This is unnecessary." I did not reply. At 5:07 p.m., he sent another email. "You're being advised poorly." No reply. At 5:33 p.m., a third email arrived. "This will damage the company." I closed the laptop without responding. At 6:02 p.m., Brenner handed me a printed courier receipt. "What's this?" I asked. "Your son filed a preliminary ownership claim with the county clerk at 3:58 p.m., he said. "Property and business assets." I read the filing copy. He had signed under sole inheritor declaration. He filed before probate closed. I said, "Yes." Brenner replied, "That makes the claim contestable." I placed the document back into the folder. Outside, traffic hummed past the office windows. Someone's coffee machine clicked in the reception area. "He believes speed equals control," Brenner said. I looked down at the timestamp again, 3:58 p.m. "He just documented intent." I said, "Yes." "And it's premature." "Yes." I closed the folder, slowly. For the first time since the funeral, I allowed myself to feel something close to steadiness. Not victory, not relief, just alignment, because everything he was doing now was leaving records. Time-stamped, filed, logged, and he still thought I was standing on that road with nothing. The board review was scheduled for Thursday at 9 a.m. By Tuesday morning, my son had already crossed 3 procedural lines. At 8:14 a.m., IT forwarded Brenner an overnight server activity report. My son had logged in remotely at 1:32 a.m. using executive credentials that were technically frozen under governance lock. How? I asked. Legacy administrator pathway. Brenner said he forgot it leaves an audit trail. The printed report showed file access attempts inside the governance archive folder. He opened scanned copies of operating agreements, but failed to unlock restricted amendments. At 9:03 a.m., accounting reported that he had called the payroll supervisor directly, bypassing formal channels. What did he ask? I said, to accelerate executive bonus disbursement before quarter close. Unauthorized again. At 9:41 a.m., we received the recorded call transcript. Company policy required recording any directive tied to financial release. His voice was calm but tight. I'm stabilizing leadership optics, he said on the recording. We don't want uncertainty. The supervisor asked, do you have sign-off? He replied, it's implied. I placed the transcript into the evidence folder myself. At 10:22 a.m., Brenner requested the neurologist's deposition summary to reinforce the incapacitation timeline. The doctor confirmed cognitive decline had impaired my husband's executive decision capacity months before death. At 11:07 a.m., my son sent a legal notice to Brenner's office claiming the amendment had been signed under emotional duress. Brenner read it once, then slid it toward me. He's building narrative defense. He said, the notice included no medical counter-evidence, no witness challenge, only assertion. At 11:54 a.m., Brenner filed a rebuttal attaching notarization footage from the signing day. The notary service recorded all high-value corporate amendments. The footage timestamp showed my husband alert, responsive, and asking procedural questions. At 12:36 p.m., my son attempted to access the warehouse inventory liquidation system again. Denied. Logged. At 1:08 p.m., the bank escalated his repeated attempts to the Institutional Risk Committee. That triggered a formal review flag attached to his executive profile. By 1:47 p.m., vendors began forwarding us copies of emails he had sent requesting accelerated payment deferments during leadership transition. One vendor called it unusual and wanted written verification. We archived every message. At 2:15 p.m., Brenner opened a fresh binder labeled Governance Conduct. Inside went server access logs, payroll call transcript, unauthorized liquidation attempts, vendor correspondence, ownership filing timestamp. He's documenting his own overreach. Brenner said quietly at 3:02 p.m., my son sent a final internal memo declaring himself interim director effective immediately. He CC'd department heads. He referenced family continuity. He still did not reference governance approval. At 3:28 p.m., 3 department heads replied requesting board confirmation before recognizing the title. At 4:11 p.m., he drove to headquarters personally. Security logged his entry time. At 4:16 p.m., he attempted to enter my husband's executive office. The door required biometric authorization. Denied. At 4:19 p.m., he requested a manual override from facilities management. Policy required written managing partner approval. Denied again. Security footage showed him standing in the hallway for 6 minutes, speaking on his phone, pacing. At 4:33 p.m., he accessed the staff conference room and held an unscheduled leadership meeting. We obtained the recording later. His tone was controlled but strained. We are moving forward, he told them. Ignore procedural noise. One manager asked, is Mrs. Hart stepping back voluntarily? He paused before answering. Yes. That statement entered the transcript. At 5:02 p.m., Brenner highlighted that line with a yellow tab. Self-incrimination step 1, He said, I said nothing. At 5:47 p.m., my son sent a revised memo to staff repeating the same claim. Second written statement. Step 2. At 6:18 p.m., he filed an expedited probate acceleration request citing operational urgency. Step 3. Brenner placed all 3 documents side by side on the conference table. Verbal misrepresentation. He said, tapping the transcript. Written misrepresentation. Tapping the memo. Judicial misrepresentation. Tapping the probate filing. A 3-step loop. All timestamped within 8 hours. At 7:04 p.m., we submitted the compiled evidence to the board chairman under formal conduct review. At 7:52 p.m., he acknowledged receipt. At 8:10 p.m., my son emailed me again. Subject, this is getting out of hand. Message, call me tonight. I closed the message without opening the attachment he had included. At 8:41 p.m., Brenner received a notice that my son had retained independent counsel. Good, Brenner said. Now everything becomes discoverable. At 9:06 p.m., we finalized the evidence binder for Thursday's review. 3 copies. Board, bank, probate court. I initialed the corner of each submission tab. The office printer hummed steadily as the final pages printed. Outside, the hallway lights dimmed automatically. At 9:32 p.m., Brenner closed the binder and slid it toward me. He crossed governance. He said, now he's crossed representation. I placed my hand on the cover, but did not open it again, because by then, this was no longer about control. It was about record. And every record was beginning to point in the same direction. Thursday arrived without announcement. At 7:12 a.m., I was already seated inside Brenner's car as we pulled into the board building parking structure. The concrete ramp curved downward in tight spirals. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. Neither of us spoke during the descent. At 7:38 a.m., we entered the executive floor conference suite. The receptionist handed Brenner a printed agenda packet, clipped in navy binding. My name appeared under managing partner review. My son's name appeared under conduct clarification. At 8:04 a.m., he arrived. He wore his father's charcoal suit. The sleeves were slightly short at the wrist. He nodded at 2 board members, but did not look at me. At 8:17 a.m., his attorney arrived carrying a leather briefcase and a tablet. They spoke quietly near the window. My son gestured twice in my direction, but kept his voice low. At 8:59 a.m., the chairman entered and closed the conference doors manually. The latch clicked louder than expected. Let's begin, he said. The room settled. At 9:02 a.m., Brenner presented the operating amendment first. Hard copy, not digital. The chairman read clause 8.2 aloud. Voting control reverts to managing partner upon medical incapacity certification. He placed the document flat on the table. Certification confirmed, he asked. Brenner slid forward the neurologist deposition and notarization footage transcript. Confirmed, he said. At 9:11 a.m., my son's attorney argued emotional duress. Brenner responded by submitting the signing footage summary and witness affidavits. At 9:23 a.m., the chairman nodded once and marked the amendment valid pending no further evidence. The conversation shifted. At issue now, he said, are operational actions taken without governance authorization. Brenner opened the evidence binder. First, bank withdrawal attempts. Second, payroll directive recording. Third, inventory liquidation request. Fourth, ownership filing timestamp. Each document was passed clockwise around the table. The sound of paper sliding across polished wood filled the room. At 9:41 a.m., the chairman asked my son directly, "Did you represent yourself internally as interim director?" My son leaned back in his chair. "I maintained stability," he said. "That was not the question," the chairman replied. My son exhaled slowly. "Yes," he said. "Did you claim Mrs. Hart stepped back voluntarily?" He hesitated half a second too long. "Yes." Brenner pressed the conference room tablet screen. The recorded leadership meeting played. His voice filled the room. "Ignore procedural noise. She is stepping back." No one spoke while the recording ended. At 9:58 a.m., Brenner placed the printed transcript beside the tablet. Next came the probate acceleration filing. The chairman read the section where my son declared sole inheritor operational authority. He removed his glasses and set them on the table. That filing predates probate closure. He said, my son's attorney began to speak, but stopped when the chairman raised his hand. At 10:11 a.m., compliance liaison representatives joined via video call. They confirmed governance lock violations tied to repeated bank override attempts. Time-stamped. Logged. Unsuccessful but documented. At 10:26 a.m., IT security submitted biometric access denial reports from headquarters. My son attempting entry into restricted executive office space without authorization. At 10:33 a.m., facilities management submitted his override request denial. All printed. All dated. The binder thickened with each edition. At 10:47 a.m., the chairman closed the file and folded his hands. Operational overreach is one matter, he said. Representation misstatement is another. Judicial filing mischaracterization is a third. 3 categories. Aligned. At 11:02 a.m., my son's attorney requested recess. Denied. The chairman continued. At minimum, he said, interim authority claims are suspended pending governance confirmation. He turned slightly toward me. Mrs. Hart, do you wish to assume active operational reinstatement effective immediately? I did not answer quickly. I adjusted the folder in front of me first. The paper edges were cool under my fingertips. Yes, I said. At 11:14 a.m., the chairman recorded the motion. Passed unanimously. At 11:26 a.m., a compliance review referral was issued regarding my son's financial override attempts. Not criminal. Institutional. At 11:39 a.m., the meeting adjourned. Chairs shifted quietly against the floor as members stood. My son remained seated. His attorney spoke to him in a low voice, pointing to sections of the binder. I gathered my documents slowly. No rush. At 11:52 a.m., I exited into the hallway. The carpet muted every footstep. A coffee cart rattled near the elevator bank. Brenner walked beside me, but did not speak until the elevator doors closed. That concludes governance, he said. Not everything, I replied. No, he agreed. Not everything. At 12:08 p.m., we reached the parking structure. My phone, newly issued that morning, vibrated once. Email notification from corporate IT. Subject, credential reinstatement completed. I unlocked the screen. Full administrative access restored. Timestamp, 11:47 a.m. I closed the phone without replying. Above us, cars moved slowly through the upper levels. Tires hummed across concrete. By then, institutional response had begun, and it would not move quickly, but it would move completely. Institutional response never arrives loudly. It comes through routine channels that carry permanent weight. On Monday at 8:06 a.m., the first audit notice went out. Subject line, Governance Compliance Review. It was addressed to executive leadership, but distributed company-wide for transparency protocol. The language was neutral, procedural, no accusations, only scope. I read it in my office while the copier outside printed quarterly vendor contracts. The machine jammed twice before finishing. By 9:12 a.m., external auditors requested system access logs dating back 90 days. IT prepared mirror drives. Each file transfer required dual authorization. At 10:40 a.m., compliance requested written clarification from my son regarding his attempted bank overrides. His attorney responded at 2:03 p.m. with a 2-paragraph statement citing administrative urgency. Auditors requested supporting documentation. None was submitted. Tuesday morning, 7:58 a.m., vendor payment deferment emails he had sent were reviewed. 3 suppliers paused shipments pending confirmation of financial authority. Operations slowed, but did not stop. Warehouse supervisors began routing decisions through my office again. One left a handwritten note on my desk confirming delivery sequencing. By Wednesday, 11:16 a.m., HR issued a formal conduct observation notice. It did not name my son directly, but referenced leadership misrepresentation risk during transitional governance review. Staff behavior shifted subtly. Meetings he scheduled saw reduced attendance. Direct reports copied compliance on correspondence. No confrontation, only distance. Thursday at 3:22 p.m., the Institutional Risk Committee finalized its review of his banking conduct. Their conclusion used careful language. Override attempts inconsistent with governance status. Profile flagged for financial supervision monitoring, not punitive, restrictive. Friday, 9:05 a.m., the probate court responded to his acceleration filing. Request denied pending estate asset clarification. Filed record amended to include governance amendment reference. Brenner forwarded the notice without comment. At headquarters, facilities quietly reassigned executive office access permissions. My husband's former office remained sealed pending inventory documentation. My son's access badge was downgraded from executive clearance to departmental clearance. No announcement accompanied the change. He learned when the door scanner turned red instead of green. At 1:14 p.m., security logged the failed access attempt and automatically notified compliance. By the following week, auditors requested personal device review tied to company email forwarding. His counsel negotiated scope limits, but metadata logs were already archived. Every step remained procedural, measured, recorded. At no point did anyone accuse him publicly. But institutional language carries its own gravity. Staff conversations quieted when he entered rooms. Calendar invites routed around him. Board correspondence excluded him pending review closure. On the third Monday, an internal policy memo circulated. Leadership authority communications must reference board-confirmed status. No names attached, but everyone understood context. I continued daily operations without commentary, signed vendor renewals, approved maintenance contracts, reviewed staffing budgets, ordinary tasks. At 4:37 p.m. one evening, accounting delivered the quarterly ledger for my signature. The paper stack was thick, edges cool against my palm. They waited until I signed before speaking. Stability helps, one of them said quietly. I nodded once. Across the hall, my son's office door remained closed more often than open. Not locked, just unused. Institutional fallout never needed spectacle. It functioned through access, through language, through absence. And once those mechanisms begin moving, they rarely reverse. 3 months later, the company moved forward without announcement. The compliance review closed at 9:18 a.m. on a Tuesday. The email subject line read, "Governance review concluded. No further action recommended beyond supervisory monitoring." My son's title was adjusted quietly, Director of Field Operations. It carried responsibility, but no executive voting authority. The board minutes reflected the change in 2 sentences. At 10:07 a.m., IT removed his override privileges permanently. The confirmation arrived in my inbox. I archived it without reply. Probate finalized 6 weeks after that. Estate distribution followed the amendment structure exactly as written. My husband's will remained intact. The operating agreement governed control. There were no disputes left to file. My son did not contest further. We spoke only twice during that period. The first time was in the hallway outside the inventory office. He stopped beside the metal shelving and said, "You could have warned me." I replied, "I did, in writing." He did not answer. The second time was during a quarterly review meeting. He presented shipment metrics and kept his eyes on the spreadsheet. His voice was steady, professional, no reference to the road, no apology, no explanation. By winter, operational rhythms returned to normal. Vendor shipments resumed full volume. Payroll cycles stabilized. Department heads stopped copying compliance reflexively. On a Wednesday afternoon at 4:22 p.m., I stayed late finishing a supply contract renewal. The building had grown quiet. The heating system hummed overhead. I made tea in the break room. The water was too hot at first. I waited before drinking. Through the glass partition, I could see the executive hallway. Lights dimmed automatically at 6 p.m. My son passed through carrying a file folder. He nodded once when he saw me. I returned the nod. Nothing more. There were no speeches, no reconciliations, no declarations. The road where he left me still exists. I drove past it once last month on my way to a supplier meeting. The gravel shoulder looked smaller in daylight. I did not stop. At 6:03 p.m., I shut down my computer. The system logged out with a soft click. Credential active. Authority confirmed. Outside, the parking lot lights flickered on in sequence. I locked the office door and walked to my car. Life did not change dramatically after that. It simply continued, and that was enough.